Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Amanda Paramesti with student number 8320200062. In this presentation, I will talk about cognitivism and foreign language learning. We will discuss about overview of cognitive theory, characteristic of cognition, many ideas of cognitive psychology, and application of cognitive theory and language learning. Cognition is a mental process by which knowledge is acquired. Cognitive theory focuses on an observable change in mental knowledge. Learning is equated with discrete changes between states of knowledge rather than with changes in observable behavior. Cognitive theory focuses on the conceptualization of students' learning processes and address the issues of how information is received, organized, stored, and retrieved by the mind. Learning doesn't concern much with what learners do, but what they know and how they come to acquire it. The central issues that interest cognitive psychologists include the internal mechanism of human thought and the processes of knowing. Cognitive psychology is concerned about cognitive process of knowledge acquisition. Knowledge acquisition is described as a mental activity that entails internal coding and structuring by the learner. The learner is viewed as a very active participant in the learning process. Cognition is a mental process by which knowledge is acquired. Characteristic of cognition. There are several basic characteristics of cognition. Number 1 is cognition is a process. 2. This process is mental. 3. This process is purposive. 4. By implication, this process is internal. 5. By implication, this process is ultimately under the control of the learners, even if one is coerced into learning by external pressure. Many ideas of cognitive psychology. Number 1 is Gestalt psychology. Gestalt psychology was founded by German thinkers Wertheimer, Kohler, and Kafka. The term of Gestalt was coined by Graf Christian von Ehrenfels. It is a German word that roughly means pattern or unified whole. Gestalt was a holistic approach and rejected the mechanistic perspectives of stimulus-response models. Knowledge comes from than just experience. Learning consists of the grasping of a structural whole, a gestalt, and the whole is different than the sum of its parts. The principles are referred to as the laws of perceptual organization or Gestalt laws, which include a law of preference, law of similarity, law of continuation, law of proximity, and law of feature and ground. Law of pregnance is also sometimes known as the law of good feature or law of simplicity. The word pregnance is a German term meaning fully developed figure. It holds that objects in the environment are seen in a way that makes them appear as simple as possible. This is our tendency to interpret ambiguous image as simple and complete rather than as complex and incomplete. Law of similarity says that elements within a mixture of objects are perceptually grouped together if they are similar to each other. This similarity can be in the shape, color, or other qualities. Next is law of continuity, says that elements of objects tend to be grouped together if they are aligned within an object. In cases where there is an intersection between objects, we tend to perceive the two objects as two single uninterrupted entities. Law of closure says that we perceive objects like shapes, letters, pictures as being whole when they are not complete. Specifically, when parts of a whole picture are missing, our perception fills in the visual gap. Law of proximity states that when we perceive a mixture of objects close to each other as forming a group. Law of figure and ground states that we have perceptual tendency to separate whole figures from their backgrounds based on one or more possible variables such as contrast, color, size, and so on. Number 2, from Edward Tolmans. Edward Tolmans have two learning theory. There are sound learning theory and latent learning theory. The sound learning theory put forth the notion that there are three parts to learning which work together as a gestalt, namely the significant or goal of behavior, the sign or signal for action, and means and relation or the internal processes and relationship. Tolman proposed his own set of three laws of learning. There are law of motivation, law of emphasis, and law of disruption. Number 2 is latent learning theory, defined as a form of learning that is not immediately expressed in an overt response. It occurs that without any obvious reinforcement of the behavior or associations that are learned. Latent literally means hidden. David Ausubel's meaningful learning focused on school verbal learning or intentional learning. Ausubel's overarching idea is that knowledge is hierarchically organized. Learning is an active process, not simply responding to environment. The key concept for Ausubel is the cognitive structure. Meaning is created through some form of representational equivalence between language and mental context involving two processes, namely reception and discovery. Meaningful learning is characterized by non-arbitrary, non-verbatim, substantive incorporation of new knowledge into cognitive structure. Number 2 is deliberate effort link new knowledge with higher order concepts in cognitive structure. Then learning related to experiences with events or objects. The next is affective commitment to relate new knowledge to prior learning. Meanwhile, the rote learning is characterized by arbitrary, verbatim, non-substantive incorporation of new knowledge into cognitive structure, and then no effort to integrate new knowledge with existing concepts in cognitive structure. Learning is not related to experiences with events or objects. No affective commitment to relate new knowledge to prior learning. Application of cognitive theory in language learning. Cognitive psychology, together with Chomsky's transformational grammar, gave rise to its own method of language learning called cognitive approach or cognitive code learning or CCL. Cognitive code learning, advocated by cognitive psychologists and applied linguistics such as Ausubel, G.B. Carroll, and K. Chastain in the 1960. CCL was intended as an alternative to the audiolingual method that emphasizes habit formation as process of language learning. Because of its emphasis on studying foreign language as a system of rules and knowledge, rather than learning it as a set of skills, the cognitive code learning is sometimes considered the modern version of the grammar translation method. Periodic application sessions in which the learners are expected to demonstrate their ability to recall what they have learned and to use it is important. Chastain states that the goal of the teacher is to expand the student's ability to create meaningful replies. On the other hand, students should always be aware of what they are learning. All learning is to be meaningful. In so doing, the teacher can do the following. Number 1 is build on what the students already know and then help the students relate material to themselves, their lab experiences, and their previous knowledge. then avoid rote learning, and then use graphic and schematic procedure to clarify relationships, and then utilize both written and spoken language in order to appeal to as many sense of as possible, and then attempt to select the most appropriate teaching learning situation for the students' involvement, and then employing the first language, visual or demonstrations as a base from which to build conceptualization of meaning and form in the second language. And the last is use inductive, deductive, or discovery learning procedures as the situation warrants. In conclusion, cognitive psychology underpins the rise of a foreign language teaching methodology called cognitive approach or cognitive code learning. It emphasizes on studying a foreign language as a system of rules and knowledge rather than learning it as a set of skills. This method was intended as an alternative to the audiolingual method that emphasized habit formation as process of learning. The role of teacher is to recognize the importance of the student's mental assets and mental activity in learning. Thank you for your listening. May all those we have shared be beneficial for all of us. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.